Hi, my name is Christina Finnegan. I am a member of Group 4, and my group members and I decided to focus our author study on Virginia Hamilton. My particular mini lesson surrounds itself around Catskinella, which is a fairy tale from her stories, which includes African American folk tales, fairy tales, and true tales. Her stories includes 19 stories conveying the magical lore and wondrous imaginings of African American women. It also highlights vibrant paintings by Leo and Diane Dillon. On the acknowledgement page contained in her stories, Hamilton wrote, "To our mothers and grandmothers, aunts and great-aunts, to all the women who stood before us, telling us about where they came from, what they saw, did, and imagined, they let us know they stood for us." And so her stories exemplifies this beautiful spirit of African American women across generations. It both remembers and propels deep-rooted feelings of perseverance, pride, strength, and hope among African American females. In Catskinella, Ella's father wishes for her to marry a woodsman, but this is certainly not what Ella envisions for herself and her future. In order to buy herself some time, Ella tells her father, "He must first give me a looking-glass mirror that can talk." When the woodsman is actually able to pull through and obtain the mirror, she finds her godmother to ask for advice. Mother Mattie states, "Tell your daddy to kill a cat." She then tells Ella to ask her father to have a dress made from the skin of the cat, but also has her tell him to have the woodsman give her a ring for the engagement. Surprisingly, Ella looks strikingly beautiful in the catskin dress, Catskinella. But she is still in trouble because she does not want to marry the woodsman. Once again, Mother Mattie comes up with another plan, and she tells Ella to prepare herself on her wedding day. She says, "You need to be in the room downstairs, and you need to put the looking-glass mirror there. And your future soon-to-be husband will be upstairs." So, over and over again, the woodsman calls downstairs, and the looking-glass hollers back, "Not quite ready yet, not quite ready yet." And so she fools her father and the woodsman in this way. And finally, the father and the woodsman break down the door, and father smashes the looking-glass because it makes him so angry. But Catskinella has already run far away as fast as she could go. When she finally finds safety at the king's castle, everyone falls in love with her beautiful face and looks past the scary skin-tight cat skin. The prince finally goes to bed lovesick, but he asks his mother for a good cake to comfort him. The best cake maker would marry the sickly prince. He turns all of the cakes away, then finally says, "How about asking pretty Ella to make me one?" Taken aback, Ella agrees. After all, it was the prince who found her a place to work and a cabin to live in. Ella made sure to bake her unwanted ring in the batter, and the queen placed her cake with the rest. Sure enough, Ella's was the one he took a bite of, and the cake was absolutely delicious. After finding the ring, he sets out to find its owner, but none of the maidens could fit in the ring on her finger. Finally, the prince calls for Catskinella. Ella shivers, the townspeople close their eyes to imagine the dress fit for a princess, and the catskin dress miraculously vanishes, revealing Ella's already beautiful facade. And of course, everybody knows what happens next. The prince asks Ella to marry him. My rationale for choosing this text: I chose Catskinella because I think the text provides many opportunities for children to question character, setting, and plot details in order to synthesize the text as they read. I know, reading the text myself for the first time, I found myself revisiting certain passages in the text and rereading because I was a bit unclear about some of the trickery and foolery that was going on. So I thought this text provided an excellent lesson in synthesis. My first objective states, while reading Catskinella, students will be able to use character setting and plot details in order to synthesize and make predictions. My second objective states, after reading Catskinella, students will be able to identify and explain a major theme in the fairy tale in their own words using details from the text as support. And thirdly, I would like for students with a fairy tale that I have assigned in small groups to be able to replicate the entire process using Post-it notes, document their thinking and their evolution of thinking, and finally to identify a theme and explain it using details. Before reading, I'd like to ask students to distinguish and make predictions about Virginia Hamilton's folk tales, fairy tales, and true tales, and talk about the differences that these tales might represent. I also want to talk to my students about synthesis. When we start a story, it might seem like the book might be about one thing, but when we read more, think about the details the author reveals, and look at illustrations, our thinking evolves or changes. This process is called synthesis. And as Debbie Miller explains to us, the language of synthesis goes something like this. I used to think, then I read or saw, now I'm thinking. So I want students to be aware of this language, and I want them to hear me using this language as I model this process, and then I want them to use this language as they document their own thinking in small groups. As I read Catskinella aloud, I will be pausing periodically so that I can explain my evolving thoughts as I synthesize the text. For example, when Mother Mattie stated, "Tell your daddy to go kill a cat," I began to think, who would want to marry a girl dressed in a cat skin? Is this a strange tradition I'm unaware of? Then I read that after Ella puts on the dress, the woodsman is still compelled to propose. Now I'm thinking that Mother Mattie meant for the catskin to scare the woodsman away. Instead, Ella looks beautiful, Catskinella, and the plan has failed. After reading, talking about the many opportunities for synthesis and putting together details that arise, I would like to revisit the text in order to talk about a theme. And after myself and students have identified a theme, first I'd like them to try on their own. But if coaching is needed, I will certainly coach them into identifying a theme. But from there, I want to revisit the text in order to show them the details that support that theme. So, for example, one theme in Catskinella relates to Ella's role as an African-American female and her struggle to define herself and outsmart the dominating men around her. So when I go back into the text, I might highlight examples of Ella asking Mother Mattie, another witty, strong female character, for advice. Or I might highlight Ella's decision to run away from her father and the woodsman, which was another bold move on her behalf. As far as the application is concerned, it will be very important for me to assign small heterogeneous groups. I think that this is a somewhat difficult activity, and I know that I'm expecting a lot of students, so I think that stronger readers might be needed to help coach some of the weaker, maybe ELL students in the classroom. Also, I will be assigning a specific tale from her stories for each group because I want to make sure that the text provides many opportunities for synthesis, and I want to make sure that there is a recognizable, strong theme that students will be able to identify. I'm also going to project that I used to think, then I read or saw, now I'm thinking language as a reminder to my students. And each group will be responsible for documenting their thinking on at least 8 Post-it notes, 1 for each new detail or new prediction or thought. Finally, students will work to discuss and identify the theme of the story, much like we did as a class, making sure to find details from the text to support their answers. Upon completion, each group will retell its story using the Post-it notes and chart paper and explain the theme using specific details, which will also be included on their chart paper. I'll gauge the effectiveness of the lesson informally by observing and listening to each group's conversation while circulating the room, but I will also formally assess the completion of each group's work using a rubric. And the things I'll be looking for, that each Post-it contains a detail from the story and or a new question or revelation. I'd like for the 8 to 10 Post-it notes to represent a clear and accurate retelling of the plot. I will also be looking for students to identify a reasonable theme and also to support that theme with at least 2 specific details from the text. And finally, the presentation must be clearly conveyed and every group member must play a role. So again, that's my mini lesson. I'm Christina Finnegan from Group 4. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed.